look, there's dynasty moves that you can make in January, February, March, April, May, June, July. It's August. These are moves that we're making right now. That's what we're talking about tonight. So this is a critical time for your dynasty team. You have to really evaluate everything. So again, this could be buying a player. This could be, a strategy that you want to implement, or something you don't want to do, something you want to shy away from. How do you want to kick this off? Because something that you are doing right here is something that I need to be a little bit better with in the off season. But why don't you tell me what it is? And then we're going to each add counterpoints or, additional talking points to each strategy that each other has. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think your next point kind of piggybacks off this point.
Yes.
In the start off, I think one of the most important things you can do right now that we're into August, now that training camp has started, you need to churn the waiver wire. You need to churn the bottom of your bench. If you play in any kind of league where you have 20 bench spots or more or something like that, so not a shallow league, you need to be churning over the bottom of your bench. Most likely there's a couple players on your bench that are not locked in starters, not locked in flex players. These are not players that are probably you're expecting to really hit your lineup. You're just holding on to them, hoping that something happens. Well, some of the players you've been holding on to since March or April, the situation has changed because football is being played on the practice field now. So coaches are getting, their looks at these rookies. They're getting looks at players that maybe weren't on the team before, or maybe players that just improved since last year. So things are changing. The depth charts are changing. Nothing's official yet, but you need to make sure you're always putting yourself in the best position to have a good player. Have a player that pops off, have a player that has the upside. You might have a player that you picked up back in the spring because you were like, oh, this guy's got upside. Look at the depth chart right now. Well, things have changed, and it might not be the same anymore. For example, now today, Tyrone Tracy goes down.
Yeah.
And for about 2 hours, he's gone for the entire season. So everyone goes and picks up Eric Gray. Well, apparently Tyrone Tracy's okay. He's back in team meetings or something like that. I don't know what's actually going on yet, if he's actually super injured or if he's actually fine. I guess we'll find out. But, things can change just so quickly. Like, that's a great example. It changed twice in just the matter of a couple hours. Jordan Whittington is a player that has been getting a lot of camp hype over with LA Rams as possibly the wide receiver 3 there. I still think it's DeMarcus Robinson at the moment.
Interesting. It's got to be Marcus Robinson. He had a really good finish season.
Jordan Whittington is a really good player. I don't think he's a great player, but he is a really just good football player. And he was a good football player at Texas. He did everything they needed him to do. He's a very driven player, and that's what he's doing over with the Rams right now. He's a great blocker at the wide receiver position. They appreciate that. Owen Wright. I never even heard of this guy, and he was starting over Rasheen Ali for the Ravens in the preseason game. Apparently, he was on the practice squad last year. I had never even heard of his name, and now he might be the RB3 for the Ravens over Rasheen Ali. Kamani Vidal, we're hearing rumors that he might not even make the team. Things change so quickly. You got to stay on top of it, and you got to turn the bottom of your waiver. You got to go find those new players that have the hype, and you're not going to drop the players you've been holding on to for years. People in the top 200 of keep trade cut. But if you have that bottom part of your bench, it definitely behooves you to get the new fresh blood in there, get the new exciting thing. Because just because you claim a player, doesn't mean you got to keep them. You can claim a player, they get some positive news, someone trades you a 4th-round pick for him, you take it. Last year, Puka Nacua got picked up off waivers by many teams in the month of August.
That is true.
And I know I fought with the comment section last year about this because people were like, oh, everyone drafted Puka Nacua. Well, if you drafted back in May, you did not always draft Puka Nacua in your draft. Yep. He made it through the draft in May and June drafts. Now, once you got to July and August, he was usually drafted in the 4th round, something like that. He didn't go undrafted very often. But Puka Nacua, I picked up Puka Nacua on the waiver wire in one of my Dynasty leagues last year in August. One of the best decisions I made all of last year. So that's why I need to turn the waiver wire, because you might find the next Puka Nacua. I don't know if you're going to find him this year, but you'll find somebody that's going to be worth your time.
A couple years ago, James Robinson was also a very good waiver wire guy as well. And I agree with this. We're piggybacking here, but I'm talking about checking out all the preseason camp battles. The one that really fascinates me is you're talking about how Kamani Vidal isn't a lock to make the roster. Isaiah Spiller, as much as I loved him coming out, freaking sucks. I'm sorry. What is this guy doing that he is still making a roster over Kamani Vidal, who, for all purposes, I think could be a fantastic RB3 for the Chargers. But you know, so are there any players that I don't roster that I think are having an edge on a competition that I can get cheaply? Or on the flip side, is there anybody who looks like they're losing a job that, you know, maybe you could flip to one of your quote unquote unsuspecting league mates? Those people are still out there. I'll give you a really good example here. And I'm going to use my hometown, my beloved Philadelphia Eagles. Everybody in the spring thought it was a lock that Paris Campbell was the wide receiver 3 for the Philadelphia Eagles. It's safe to say, right? We all thought that
I
after
said it here on the podcast. I said, go get Paris Campbell.
yeah, I thought when he was signed, I was like, good. There's our WR3 that hopefully if Goddard stays healthy, you know, they won't really need their wide receiver 3 a lot, but he's been banged up. Enter Johnny Wilson, a guy who I wasn't high on. He was a 6th-round pick. There was 2 reasons I didn't think he would do anything here. 1, 6th-round draft pick for a wide receiver, and 2, he was drafted after Anaya Smith, who has not looked good in camp. I think Anaya Smith was brought in to replace Britton Covey. Britton Covey's looked fantastic. He's a great punt kick returner as well. So the fact is, when your 3 wide receiver sets are getting marched out on the field for the Philadelphia Eagles, a high-powered offense, seen what they could do. Johnny Wilson is out there. He's player 294 on Keep Trade Cut. I think you can move a 4th for him right now, possibly even less. You know, there's other battles that are kind of interesting right now. We got Minshew versus O'Connell out there. The Denver quarterback situation, I don't really know what's going on there. It's what? Stidham. I think Bo Nix was 3rd on the last I saw. We got the wide receiver situation for the Bills. We got the Chargers wide receiver situation as well as the running back situation. And look, today we saw that J.J. McCarthy is going to get knee surgery. So it's Sam Darnold season. Who's the backup in Minnesota after Sam Darnold now? It's Nick Mullins. Well, you have a choice. You could pick up Nick Mullins or Jaron Hall.
I want to pick up Nick Mullins.
Yeah, maybe you just look elsewhere. Check out those camp battles. See who's getting the edge there. Obviously, most of the time the starters are locked in. Or if there's camp battles for starters right now, it's like offensive, defensive linemen, stuff like that. So if there's any backup guys that you think could help you and you can get cheaply, go ahead and do it.
One way to stay up to date with what's going on in the camps, the way that I do is I have 32 beat writers on notifications. 32 beat writers is a Twitter account that kind of aggregates all of the beat writers across the NFL and what they're reporting. And obviously those guys they're getting eyes on training camp. They're talking to the coaches every single day. So you get a lot of good knowledge out of those guys. They do blow my phone up though, that I have on notifications. It's kind of ridiculous sometimes. So be prepared if you're going to do that. Even if you don't have on notifications, just go check out that page. Definitely
great page.
Definitely recommend them. It's great for getting kind of the information that you need right now.
I got a better one for you. His name is Caleb, and he's always dropping stuff in our breaking news section of our Discord. Honestly, there are times I get alerts from Caleb faster than I get them from the actual source. He's on Pacific time. I don't know how he's getting these alerts before me, but he's doing it, and he's awesome in there. Caleb does a great job keeping everybody up to date in the Discord. So, Nate, what is the next move that you're making?
All right, Mike, you're going to like this kind of move. I'm acquiring cheap tight ends.
Baby, let's talk about it.
Now, I'm in practice, I'm probably not acquiring as many cheap tight ends as I'd like because I already have so many on my rosters. You and I, Mike, we're tight end hoarders a little bit. But this is the time of the year because there is always a couple tight ends outside of the top 10, top 12 that end up having really good seasons and being, somewhere between tight end 6 and 15. And they help you win games. They help you win weeks when your number 1 tight end is not out there. You need some help. And, guys like Tyler Conklin, Hunter Henry, Zach Ertz. He's back and he's starting out on the offense. Tyler Higbee is coming off injury. I don't know how soon we'll see Tyler Higbee, but he fits the category of what he's been the past couple of years. He's a cheap, productive tight end. These guys are going for like 3rd, 4th round picks. Probably not even 3rd round picks, mostly 4th round picks. Colby Parkinson got paid this offseason by the Rams, and he got paid good money. I believe it was like $20 million guaranteed over 3 years to go to the Rams, and he sat out with the starters for the first preseason game. There is something there with Colby Parkinson. I would definitely recommend you go pick him up if he's on your waivers. You probably can get him for a 4th round pick. Nobody is talking about Colby Parkinson, and he is pretty much, as long as he continues to be the starter, which doesn't have a ton of competition. Tyler Higbee, like I said, coming off that injury, not going to be around for like pretty much at least the first half of the season, if not longer. Parkinson's probably going to have at least a tight end 2 season, top 24. potential for more. He's got Matthew Stafford throwing the ball. Another guy, Josh Wiley. We didn't talk about him very much over the past year. He's a rookie last year, second year this year for the Tennessee Titans. Sounds like he's doing pretty well. It's not going to cost you anything. He's probably on your waiver wire. Jelani Woods. Zach's talked about Jelani on this show a couple different times. But Jelani Woods, he's not going to cost you a lot either, and he's got the potential to be productive. There's a couple tight ends out there that are so cheap, and as soon as they start hitting, and you can flip them for a third. You can keep them. You probably just keep them because, hey, it doesn't hurt to have a productive tight end 3 on your team. So I definitely recommend going out right now. This is the perfect time. While it's still a lot of unknown with the tight end position, it always is. They're always undervalued before you actually have to set a lineup. Go out there right now. Find your tight end 3, maybe even your tight end 2 if you're kind of neglected that position. You go ahead and get yourself a Tyler Conklin. You're probably going to be okay. So right now, great time to go acquire those cheaper tight ends.
I think Mike Gesicki could be a nice cheap tight end add too now.
Post type sleeper.
Yeah, because they drafted, what was the kid? Eric All, is that the one that they drafted there?
And Tanner McLaughlin as well.
Yeah, but
I like him. I like Tanner McLaughlin.
I liked him as a receiver.
We'll be talking about him in a year or two.
We might be, yeah. I just think Gesicki's going to have a decent season out there in Cincinnati. So the most important thing you could do, in my opinion, right now is just honestly assess your team, look at strengths and weaknesses before you have to set a lineup, because we're a couple weeks out, Nate. That's coming your way. It's really the first lineup set of the year that's the hardest one of all your leagues, because you really got to feel your teams out. So set a lineup then. See how it is. Write it down on paper. You know what I mean? Sometimes if you're a real visual person, it's writing it out and getting a feel for it. That helps me sometimes. I know that sounds weird, but sometimes that's how I prep for the pod too. I write things out and it works a little bit better for me. Look, we all think we're preseason champions. You've heard of the term roster bait. That's great, but it doesn't matter if somebody else, their team's just a lot better than you. Let's get real with it. So what holes need to be filled on your roster? Do you have a quarterback deficiency? Running back always seems to be a problem of mine, no matter what league I'm in. Wide receiver, that one's probably a little easier to restock the cupboard on that one. Go get Jermaine Burton now while you can. And do you have any other strengths that you can kind of use to balance out your team? Are you loaded at one position and you need help in another? How can you use that strength to your advantage in the offseason to help you win games in the regular season? And hey, look, if your team is bad, you looked at it and you're like, well, this is just trash. Do you want to make moves that make you struggle now, but you get younger and you add plus assets, the productive struggle, if you will? Is that the way you want to do it? Like, look, I still got a lineup set. It's not great. I might win 3 or 4 games, but we're all in for 2025. So take a few minutes, look at your team, chop it up, and hey, you know what? Shameless plug. Payhip.com/Dynasty Rewind. There's still time to get your roster reviewed before the season starts. You can request someone from the crew if you would like to. Hey, let's move on. What is the next move that you're making in the dwindling offseason, man? We're really, really close.
Not much time left. So some leagues you still might have a couple extra players on your roster than you're supposed to have. Maybe you put some players on that. I definitely don't do that at all. There's a couple leagues where you might have a couple more players on your team than you're allowed to have, or maybe you put some players in IR. Maybe they're coming off now. They were on the pup. They're coming off now, and you just, you have to cut a player. Always try. I know we talk about this anyway. Trying to trade the players, but this is the time of the season where things are still unknown. So maybe you're not always trying to trade the very bottom of your player that you're going to cut. But if you have second thoughts about cutting that player, people are usually pretty open to trading at this point of the season because things are more unknown. We don't know who's good this year yet. We don't know who's bad yet this year. So there's probably someone in your league who wants some of your bench players. And like I said, not necessarily the very, very bottom of the barrel of your bench. Those guys are always hard to trade. And of course, we always want to trade them for a 4th or 5th round pick, but that's difficult to always do. So, when we're cutting down our rosters, when we're getting ready for the season, don't be afraid to trade some of those players on your bench. Like guys like Calvin Austin, Demarcus Robinson, those wide receiver 8s, 9s, 10s on your team, they might be a flex play at some point this season, but they're not really cuttable either if you play like in a deeper league. What can you do with those guys? You don't feel emotionally attached to some of these high upside stashes on your bench. You might hit with 1 or 2 of them, but you're also probably going to miss with 3 or 4 of them for every 1 or 2 that you hit. Kind of a similar idea to churning the bottom of your roster in the waiver wire at this point of the season, right before we get there. Let's churn that kind of middle part of your bench as well if we need to. because we can get future draft capital. Maybe we can combine, we can consolidate 2 bench players for a guy that might go into our flex. Don't be scared to make these moves before the season starts. Don't paralyze yourself until games are actually played to start making moves. A lot of times we get so excited about Dynasty, after the Super Bowl, during the draft, we're making trades all spring into the summer, and then it does slow down at this point. And then people start get back into it in August, but everyone's looking at their team. They're thinking about how they're going to win because, like Mike was just talking about, we've all looked at our teams for a couple months now. We're excited about our teams. We're invested in our teams. Don't be too emotionally invested in your team. Still be willing to make moves in August in the weeks coming up to the season.
My last move that I'm going to make is I'm going to buy low on Las Vegas Raiders wide receiver Trey Tucker. My man is entrenched in the slot for the Raiders. And look, let's take a look at this. I've heard a lot of people. I talked to some Raiders fans this past weekend at the Expo, and they think that Minshew is going to win that quarterback position. So let's look at what Josh Downs did in the slot last year. And I'm not saying that Tucker is Downs, but there's a chance that he's turning in something startable for you. So I'm just using information that I had from the past year, how Josh Downs did, and then we can kind of get a gauge here. He was in the slot 81.3% of the time, and he went ahead and got 68 catches, 771 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So that is much better than Trey's 19 catches for 331 yards and 2 touchdowns the past season. But if he bumps up another 300 or 400 yards, which is possible, Devontae Adams is getting older. These things could happen.
He could be traded. There are rumors that he could be traded as well.
He could be traded. And, Trey Tucker wasn't always in the slot. He flipped outside a lot too. So if Devontae Adams gets moved, Trey Tucker is going to be utilized all over the field. It's time to get him right now. Again, temper your expectations. On today, it's August 13th. I'm not buying him to be a wide receiver 3 on my team. This is a player I'm buying low on for the future. He's player 273 on Keep Trade Cut. He's wide receiver 101. So he's obtainable. Now, I used Fantasy Calc. Nate, I'm a big Fantasy Calc guy. And I saw a ton of trades for him going straight up for a 25 fourth. I did see one, Tucker in a 24 fourth, and they sent a 25 third for that. So third round, and you get back Tucker in a 24 for fourth, a third from next year for Trey, and a fourth this year. Sorry, forgive me. So I tried to trade for him, and then I did move. I had another guy. It didn't look like his team would be too interested in picks, so I traded him Darnell Mooney for Trey Tucker and a 25 fourth.
All right.
So
I like that trade.
Yeah,
I actually am a big fan of that trade, Mike.
I didn't think that Darnell Mooney was going to get on my starting lineup at any point. That team was pretty decent at the wide receiver position, and if I was starting Darnell Mooney, I was in big trouble. So, I figure let me move off from a guy that's another strategy. Is this guy ever going to legitimately get a start on my team? And get a younger guy who I believe in a little bit more. So that's what we got. Yeah, that's all I got. Sorry I couldn't get any more Trey Tucker trades done for you guys.
It's a shame. I have Trey Tucker. I was just checking. I have Trey Tucker in 2 leagues.
Great. So that's all we got for you guys and gals out there today. And hey, you know what? It is absolutely free if you go ahead, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this podcast. So until next time, for Nate, I'm Mike. Thanks for listening, everybody.